I guess I should pray that God would release me from this burden. That's what I wrote on November 7th, 1993, still hoping that I could pray away the gay. Just a few months earlier, I was living in Atlanta with a Mennonite family, and I was working for the ACLU of Georgia. One weekend in Atlanta, I borrowed the family's car to go to a record store, and I waited in line to buy RuPaul's first CD and to get her autograph. I'm pretty sure that everyone in line was gay. I first met RuPaul at Tower Records near NYU during my first year at law school. It was during law school, my first year in law school, that I learned about Manhattan Mennonite Fellowship from a fellow student. I had been attending MMF for approximately 1 year at the time that I wrote down how I was praying not to be gay. Less than 3 months after writing that prayer request, I would get baptized into this church. Other people's views, meaning majority views, my family's reaction, the fear of AIDS, kept me from accepting my identity as a gay cis male. While I could not accept myself, I am glad that I did not spread hate or advocate discrimination against gays, like many closeted preachers and politicians do. I participated in the AIDS Walk at the time and campaigned for a gay political candidate, all while lying to anyone who wanted to know about my sexual orientation. But maybe I was advocating discrimination by not speaking up for myself. When I went through the faith inquiry at MMF, one of my fellow inquirers was a lesbian. She was great, and I do not recall having any problem with her being a member. But some people who attended MMF or lived at Meadow House did. One of the other persons in the faith inquiry group freaked out, according to our minister at the time, John Rempel. The Mennonite church at that time was banishing churches that admitted gay members. Even accepting divorced people was frowned upon. And the anti-gay people associated with MMF threatened to report us to the conference. According to John Rempel, an anti-gay person made phone calls to all levels of authority and warned John that he would go to hell if he did not denounce homosexuals. When she spread this information around, 7 people left the church. John alerted the overseer of MMF that the church was welcoming open LGBTQ folks, including those in relationships. We were welcoming them to participate in MMF activities and its mission, but we were not welcoming them into membership. That was another reason not to come out. At the time, I did not challenge MMF members' fear of being kicked out of the conference. I was so new to the church. But my silence resulted in continued discrimination. The overseer of MMF was cautious, but not harsh. John then brought the subject up to the New York City Mennonite executive. According to John, he and 4 others met, and I'm presuming that this was the New York City Mennonite Council. John presented his thoughts to the group. 2 conservative evangelicals attacked John verbally to the point where the other 2 conservative evangelicals protested the harsh treatment against John and demanded that the others stop their verbal attacks. The compassionate conservatives said that while practicing homosexuals might be sinners, there were other sins that Christians committed regularly, and that we should give as much attention to those sins as we were to the gay issue. We should stop singling out any one sin. While we may disagree with the 4 conservatives, at least 2 of them were open-minded enough to stand up for someone they disagreed with. MMF wanted to be open and accepting. How could it not be in Manhattan? It was so close to gay neighborhoods. But the pressure not to accept members that were gay was too much for a small church that wanted some connection to this historical conference, and it was dependent on the conference at that time. When I asked my former co-elder Kathy for her reflections on MMF's evolution, she told me the story of a Menno House resident who shared with her that he was HIV positive. He wasn't sure if he was willing to tell the other residents, but he and Kathy talked it through. He was worried that the residents would have concerns about living with him. No one did. There was a very tear-filled house meeting, and they prayed for his health and for his healing. This was before open and affirming became a common description for churches like ours. If the church here took a brave moral stand to be open and affirming back in the 90s, would it look like this church was only concerned about gay membership? Anyway, that was one of the concerns. MMF did send Kathy to Boston to meet with other Mennonite churches supportive of gay members. Boston and Germantown attended and were way ahead of MMF. And she also remembered that a church from Lancaster, Pennsylvania was also present. And I'm guessing that this was the group that eventually became Menno Neighbors, who provided support and guidance to churches wrestling with the issue. Eventually, other organizations sprouted out of this concern as well. I believe most of us at MMF during the 90s wish we became open and affirming sooner than we did. And I hope that our current and future members will be braver and learn from our mistake. Now, this brings me to the Supreme Court. And although some people celebrated the determination that federal law forbids an employer from firing you just because of your sexual orientation or gender identity, the court has not yet determined if an employer or an individual can do it for religious reasons. Now, Sasha spoke last week about the harm that churches do to the LGBTQ community and how it's not in line with the teachings of Jesus. But the Catholics and Christians on the Supreme Court are probably ready to give its approval to anti-gay religious beliefs. The U.S. Constitution gives religious freedom, but are all religions worthy of this protection? Well, this country definitely thinks the Constitution protects Christianity, including false beliefs that God wants us to harm and discriminate against the LGBTQ community. A year or two ago, the Supreme Court held that a Colorado administrative board could not denigrate a sincere Christian belief. The plaintiff's belief was that he cannot bake a wedding cake for two gay men. Now, would the Supreme Court protect a hateful Christian belief that one cannot bake a cake for someone with different skin color? I hope the court will explain to the discriminators that having to tolerate or interact with someone with a different belief system does not mean you approve of the other person's belief system. I hope that the Supreme Court surprises us again. But discrimination will grow if we do not vote out the current appointer of Supreme Court justices. Voting matters. We might end up with more justices that don't believe in systemic racism, justices that disregard the LGBTQ community, and justices that let men decide what women can do with their bodies. Pray all you want, but I will be praying that you vote.